There are a lot of great things about being a therapist in private practice. In fact, I often joke that I'm unbossable. I couldn't work for someone again, and I wouldn't change it for the world. But there are some drawbacks, one of which is anytime you take time off, you don't get paid. I sat down with Ashley Comegys and we talked about maternity leave, taking time off for our own health, caring for aging family members, and what to do when you're in private practice. You have a full caseload of therapy clients counting on you, and you can't really afford to just not work. Welcome back to the channel for therapists who are ready to have more income and more impact with less burnout. Let's get into it. My friend, my co collaborator at different times, a wonderful person, wonderful therapist. And we are going to be talking about ways to take time off as therapists, especially in private practice, when you don't have vacation time, you don't have sick time, and life comes up and we have to take care of ourselves. And that can be really challenging. So, I'm so happy to have you on, Ashley. Welcome. For those who don't know Ashley, could you tell us a little bit about yourself? Give us your little
Yeah.
elevator speech.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm Ashley Comegys. I'm a licensed clinical social worker with a multi-state online therapy practice. And in my practice, I specialize working with women helping to navigate life transitions, grief, loss, and trauma. And I specialize in perinatal mood and anxiety disorders, as well as working with military spouses. Separate from my therapy work, I do coaching and consulting to support other women and mom clinicians in building their own therapy practices and helping to empower them in to do it in a way that works for them and is not because this is what I'm quote unquote supposed to do or have to do, but really building a practice that works for them and similar to what we are going to be talking about today that allows them that kind of flexibility, time freedom, and autonomy to take time off as they need. Because I'm a firm believer that private practice just affords that to you in a way that working for somebody else doesn't necessarily allow you to do.
Absolutely. It affords that, sure. But it's also kind of a double-edged sword because in private practice, you don't get paid time off, you don't get vacation time. And also something that I've noticed, I don't know if you've noticed this too, but when you're in business for yourself, it feels like people just assume that you can just take time off. Oh,
Right.
just take the day off. No, I still have to work.
Right. Right. No, I mean, there's the nice thing is like there is flexibility with working for yourself that you don't have, someplace else. And, you know, one of the beautiful things about entrepreneurship is you can work when you want to work, but
Hmm.
it also means that if you aren't working, there's something not getting done. Because, for many people, if you are especially just kind of starting off in private practice, you probably don't have like an admin assistant or even a VA. You're most likely working by yourself. And so a lot of times we are the whole clinical team, right?
Hmm.
And so yes, when you're able to take time off, that's great, but it also means that other work might not be getting done, or because you're not having that face to face time with a client, you're not necessarily getting paid.
That's right. Yes. And I know for me, I am grateful every single day that I don't have to ask someone for time off.
Yes.
Like when
Yes.
I talk to my clients and they're like, oh, my time off got denied, or I only have 2 weeks vacation, or I personally could not go back to that. We always
No.
joke that once you are self-employed, you become unbossable.
Yes. Yeah.
And I would rather hustle to, make up that time
Yeah.
than have to ask somebody.
Yeah. And it's interesting because I went into private practice before I had a family. I kind of fell into it by accident in that my husband's in the Coast Guard and we had moved actually to Hawaii and I wasn't able to find a job where we were living but I needed income. And so I just went into private practice because it was like, okay, I can do this and it will still allow me to travel with him for his work, or we lived so far away from family at the time that weekend trips weren't a thing. So you would have to take significant time off. And so
Mhm.
I then had my first baby while I was in private practice. And then we were in the midst of a move and a bunch of other stuff happening that I left the group that had started and I was a part of. And we had a big move across country. And at that time, I think I was looking at, okay, am I going to go back into working at medical social work, or I didn't really want to do community mental health at the time. And I think the question was because at that time I didn't see having a strictly online therapy practice as a real option. This was
Mhm.
in 2018 and I was doing online therapy at the time, but it wasn't the only way. And I had done the whole thing of trying to establish my practice in Hawaii and then having to shut it down and move. And we would be moving every few years. And I was like, I can't, it's not sustainable. But the alternative of going to work for somebody else, and I needed to have flexibility in my schedule because for my husband being in the military, there is there are times when he has some flexibility, but he is much more beholden to what they say, right? If they're like, something's happened, we need you to go respond, or,
Sure. The
you
military is
know,
not known for being super flexible.
flexible. No, exactly. So I just needed that. And it really took time to try to figure out what that was. And I also struggle with this idea of like having to work for somebody else, but really like the big thing was my child needs me, or may need me. Like, what am I supposed to do when the school calls? I just got an email like there's a hand, foot, mouth going on at my daughter's school right now. And I'd say probably 80% of the time it falls on me to be the one to adjust my schedule. So, going back to starting out, I couldn't imagine having to go work for somebody else. And, there's times when you're like, oh, I need a change or something. And do I want to do XYZ? And I always come back to, why am I in private practice? Why do I have an online therapy practice only? And it's because I need that time freedom and flexibility, right?
Mhm.
Like, I don't want to have to ask somebody else. Like, we were just talking, tomorrow's my son's birthday, and I'm after this going to get to go take pizza and cupcakes to his class. I couldn't do that if I worked for somebody else, or if I did, I'd have to take time off for that. And I then don't have that vacation time for something else. So I think looking at the reasons why why you want to do private practice, and like you said, that time, having that time off, that you aren't beholden to somebody else, like some corporation or some organization telling you when you need to work, or you have to work. I think is just such a key driver for many of us getting into this area of mental health work.
Absolutely. I mean, that's when it changed for me when my daughter was born and I went back to work part-time at my agency job, which I actually loved that job. I mean, when I first started out, I would have done that job for free. I adored it. I was a case manager in HIV/AIDS work, and so I was a Ryan White case manager. So I helped my
Yeah.
clients access healthcare,
Yeah.
and I became a therapist for people living with HIV. And I did the thing where I went back part time. I put my baby in childcare, and I'd be sitting at the desk pumping, of course,
Yep.
between clients,
Yeah. Yeah.
propping everything up so I could do notes.
Yeah.
And I eventually realized that this is almost costing me more
Mm,
because I wasn't in this kind of work, community mental health. I think I was making $16 an hour with a master's, which is just
yeah. Yeah.
mortifying.
Yeah.
I was paying more than that in childcare. It just didn't make sense. So that's when I made the leap to private practice. And I actually started out half and half. I kept that part time job for a year while I built my private practice on the weekends
Yeah.
and in the evenings. And then I made the switch. So I had a kind of soft transition.
How did you at the time, like knowing who you were doing private practice, kind of starting it up, and
Hmm.
in at the beginning when you're starting up a practice, it does take a lot of time, but a lot of the time is not necessarily in that client facing work. It's like getting all the other stuff taken, set up
Mhm.
and T's crossed, I's dotted so you can start working with clients. And so as you were doing that and then started seeing clients and
Mhm.
you had this part-time, work with your agency, how did you financially structure that so that you could eventually leave that part-time practice?
Yeah, so I started out by subletting an office. I sublet an office for $10 a session,
Yeah.
and then once that got to be I filled up Saturdays first, and then I filled up Fridays, and then once that was full, I got my own office. At this
Yeah.
point, I still had my day job. So,
Yeah.
that's how I built it, and I think back and I kinda laugh because I did everything the way that people tell you not to do it,
Yeah.
and it worked for me. Like, the very first thing I did was I made business cards, and I
Yeah.
started letting everyone I know that I had a private practice and I was taking clients.
Yeah.
And I literally walked up and down the street and handed those out. I put them on bulletin boards at, like, the community grocery store and
Yeah.
the little community co-op, put them on the bulletin board at Panera, told everyone I know. So I had clients before I even had the space worked out. Like, I
Yeah.
had people waiting. Another thing I did do, and I know there are people out there that are gonna disagree with me. I'll put a disclaimer on this. I'm in Columbus, Ohio. Everybody here wants to use their insurance. There is
Mhm.
no way I would have been able to build a self-pay
Yeah.
practice. I am 15 years in private practice, and I'd
Yeah.
say maybe 20% of my caseload is self-pay at any
Yeah.
given time. So
Yeah.
I got on an insurance panel. I did it right away. I knew how to do it because I had worked in a clinic where I
Yeah.
did some of that credentialing stuff.
Right.
So I made business cards. I got on the panel. I told everyone I know. I got a space on Saturdays, and then I filled it to the point that it was costing me more to keep my agency job because I was
Mm.
turning people away.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it worked for me. People are like, old
Yeah.
fashioned marketing doesn't work. I handed out business cards with boxes of donuts to treatment centers and OBGYN offices, and like it worked for me. I'm a fan.
Yeah. 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 There was something you said, and I'm trying to remember what it was that made me think of, I can't remember I can't
Well, if
remember
it
the
comes
thought, but
back, no
yes.
biggie. If it comes back, let me
Yeah.
know. But really, what we're here to talk about. So we've both got our private practices, which really came from necessity,
Yeah.
and so things happen in life.
Mhm.
You've been very open about your struggles with postpartum depression, and you've gone through all these moves and relocating and kids. And for me, it's been also like you having my child. I only have one child, but then having cancer and having to
Mhm.
go through chemo, surgery, and radiation. And most recently, being the caregiver for my elderly grandmother. And I
Yeah.
moved her from Florida to Ohio. And I'll tell you what, this year for me has been the messiest year of my life.
Mhm.
I had to go to Florida 3 times between January and March. I moved her up here, was constantly getting calls in the middle of sessions from
Yeah.
medical people and emergencies. And Um, for me, I just finally had to embrace I'm a messy human. And if you need a
Yeah.
super structured human as your therapist, I'm not the right fit for you.
Yeah.
And that's worked
Embracing
well,
that. Yeah.
embracing that because most of my clients also are parents. Many of them are also neurodivergent,
Yeah.
and they're okay with being a little flexible, a little messy. I don't charge
Sure.
my no-show fee anymore. I actually got rid of it because I was having to cancel so much that it did not feel aligned with me to charge them.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that brings us to the question that we're here to talk about. All these things are happening. Life is lifing
Yeah.
big time. And so, how do therapists, when they go through these tough seasons, not go bankrupt, essentially?
Yeah.
Like, you're not face to face with clients, you're not making income. So, let's talk about some tools and strategies that have helped us
Yeah.
that, in hopes that those will help other people as well.
Yeah. So, one of the things, I talk a lot with women about taking maternity leave in private practice. And I have a course actually called the Maternity Leave Blueprint that walks you through everything about talking with clients about your pregnancy, through how to just manage your symptoms through postpartum, and how to financially plan. And one of the things that I encourage clients, or clients that I'm working with that are going to be taking maternity leave, is to, as soon as you can, start looking at, what do I need financially to get through a period of time. And in the course, there is a calculator that helps you walk through, like, if you say, I want to take 6 weeks versus I want to take a year or 6 months, what do I need to cover my personal expenses? And so these are questions, even if you're not using this calculator, but what do I need to cover my personal expenses, right? Like, if you do have a partner, what are we able to cover on their salary, on their income? And
Mhm.
so if we look at it that way, like, what can we cover with them? Then what do I need to cover in our personal expenses as well? And then in addition to that, what do I need to cover for my business expenses? And one of the things I do love about having a practice that is just online is there's low overhead, right? So I'm
Mhm.
not paying for an office space. Most of it is just tech stuff. And so
Mhm.
are there certain expenses that either you don't have to cover during that time or that you can reduce? So let's say you do have an office space.
Mhm.
Can you sublet that during the time that you're on leave? Um, if you, when I went on this most recent maternity leave, I reduced my EHR subscription so that I still had it. It's still kept on my clients' files, but like, I wasn't charging credit cards. I wasn't holding sessions. I wasn't billing insurance. So I didn't need the top tier, and I could drop it and put it back up when I was ready to come back. So being
Mhm.
able to look at, like, what are those expenses? And so then if I know what I need to be able to have covered month to month for the personal and month to month for the business, then I'm able to say, okay, so how much do I need to be saved, like have saved to take that time? If I'm saying I'm going to take 3 months leave, what do I need to have saved to cover all of that stuff? And then again, I think it's a question, especially if you have a partner. And if you don't, then yes, you're going to have to look at this in a different way.
Mhm.
So, what can we, or what can I save to cover that time? So, if
Mhm.
we, let's say, for instance, we know I'm going to need to have 6,000 a month to cover the minimum personal expenses, the minimum business expenses. How can I start saving for that? And if you are listening to this, and whether you are already pregnant or you want to have a family, what do I need to be able to cover that amount of time? And starting to just put that away. Again,
Mhm.
if it's something that you have a partner, can we work together to look at other ways that we're saving? So it's not just coming out of the private practice income you're making, to put that aside. But I also think this doesn't just apply to, say, maternity leave. I mean, you talk about your grandmother and
Mhm.
having to be her caretaker, and cancer is not something that you look at the calendar and you're like, yeah, in 9 months, I'm going to have to deal with that, right? Like, that is a comes right away
I'll tell you
situation.
what, Ashley, when I was diagnosed, looking at my calendar and seeing that I had a full caseload
Yeah.
and that I had to contact every single one of those people.
Yeah.
And for a couple weeks, I just canceled everybody and I said,
Understandably
I
so.
need to deal with
Yes.
this. But then when I came back on, I did come back to work and I'm so glad I did because that was really a saving grace to be able to feel
Sure.
normal. I mean, I had a wig. And it was during COVID, so it was all online. And I
Yeah.
would throw on my wig, throw on some makeup, and see my clients. But I had to cut way back. I was seeing about 10 a
Yeah.
week, and I had previously
Yeah.
been seeing 25 a week. So I had to
Right.
refer out a bunch of people.
Right.
It
Right.
was wild. And it was actually having cancer and going through that made me realize I need more income streams than just
Yes.
therapy.
Yeah. And so knowing that life happens, like, it's not planned and it's usually unexpected, I think even that same strategy of looking at, what do I need minimal per, if I had to take a month off because a
Mhm.
family member is sick, or I am in the hospital or something, what do I need to have to cover minimum personal and minimum business expenses?
Mhm.
But going to what you were just saying about additional income streams, I think so. I'm actually yesterday, 1 month postpartum. My baby just turned one yesterday. It was my
Mm.
third. And,
Oh,
thank
congratulations.
you.
Oh,
Thank you. And you and I have talked, over this last year that it has been really hard. I've gone through a ton of transitions, not just adding a third baby. We had a major family move because of the Coast Guard.
which was
I
kind of unexpected, right?
So it was expected. We knew it was
Okay.
coming. Yeah, we knew it was coming, but like, I mean, you can expect it, but it still is awful.
It's
Like,
still, yeah,
yeah,
it still
yeah.
uproots everything.
But I'll tell you what was unexpected. I've struggled after each of my babies in different ways, and postpartum depression hit me this time in a way that like I have never experienced. And so it was hard. I it was hard coming back to work. I knew financially I was not going to be able to take as long of a maternity leave as I had wanted to. It just we financially couldn't make it work. But I also was like looking at this place of I need to come back by this time to make it work financially. And yet I don't feel ready mentally and emotionally. And so I think I think that's one of my biggest things I want people to take away is that like if you are not okay, you can't be serving the clients that
That's
you need to be
right.
serving. And so how can you ensure that you can take that time off without it becoming an additional stress? And that's where I think
Right.
having an additional income stream,
Mhm.
I wish we could say like you can survive just off of private practice and you can. Like I don't think that that's inaccurate. Could you survive off of that? Absolutely. But what happens in those times that are unexpected or
Yeah, see, I think I agree with you and I disagree with you. I think under a certain set of circumstances,
that's the key.
if you're single, if you're in a high-paying area, if you're not in an oversaturated area, if you have plenty of referrals, you have a niche, see 30 to 35 clients a week. Like,
Sure.
yes, you can make a killer living in private
Yes.
practice.
Yeah.
None of that is my case. Like,
Right. No, mine either. Mine either. No, I can't see that many clients a week
yes.
because of what my family needs
Yeah,
and
and I'm
because of my own
51.
mental health.
Same. I'm 51. I'm older. My own mental health, my focus is less than it has been. My brain is not what it used to be, like from
Yeah.
chemo and just from aging and everything
Yeah.
else. And like I can be a good therapist for about 12 clients a week max.
Yeah.
There is
Yeah.
no way anybody could make a living off of
Yeah.
that.
No. No.
I mean, at least
Unless
not.
you're like you said, at a premium rate
Hmm.
in a very niched area. And for some people that might be what they want to get to, right?
Hmm.
You know,
Absolutely. That's one path.
yeah, I mean, I'm like you that I have a practice that takes insurance. I don't take every insurance. I did that
Yeah. I
before,
don't
and
either.
that
I've
was a
dropped a
mess.
lot. Yeah.
Yeah, like I'm very particular about which ones I take because I know that okay, that's a rate that I can accept. And I'm probably about like you, like about 20 to 30% private pay. So I do have that. But for me, because my practice moves so often, I have not done the type of marketing that really is needed to
Hmm.
just be or just be private pay. And that's
Hmm.
intentional because can I do that? Could I work towards that if I want to? Absolutely. But that takes a different level of marketing and a different level of energy and just connection and kind of not organizing, but strategy that I can't do that every time we move, or
Hmm.
in a way that I can like sustain because even if I do that in that community or even if I do that in that state, well, then I'm gonna have to replicate that next time.
Right.
No. So
So you
that
need
has been
something portable,
yes, yes.
flexible. Yeah.
And so yeah, like and that doesn't require a lot of bandwidth from me.
Hmm.
It doesn't require a lot of
Yeah.
bandwidth.
And you know what, Ashley, too, for me, it's not just bandwidth, it's also scheduling. I have found
Yes.
it harder and harder to be scheduled by the hour, even
Yeah.
just my physical bodily needs. Like I used to be able to see 9 clients a day. And it was hard. I didn't do it
Yeah.
often, but I could do it and get through it. Now 5 is my
Yeah.
9.
Yeah.
Like that's how much focus I have to give. I need to get up and move. I can't sit in a chair for 9 hours a day anymore.
Yeah.
Um, things like, and as I get older, I find that I have less patience
Yeah.
for things like I need a drink of water and I'm feeling trapped in this session and I can't go get one. I'm going to
Yeah.
go get one. I'm going to be like,
Yeah.
sorry, client, I need a quick break. I'm going to grab a drink of water. And if people have a problem with that, then I'm not the right fit. And
Right.
you hear it
Right.
in the therapist Facebook groups all the time. People are so judgmental. It almost feels like if you look away
Yeah.
for a second, like
Yeah. Yeah.
I need to be human. And I think our
Right.
whole field needs to embrace that if we're going to
Yes.
last.
Yeah. No, for sure. For sure.
To be in a field where we can't go to the bathroom, can't get a drink of water, can't look away from the screen, can't,
Yeah.
lose focus for a second. I can't do it anymore.
Well, and what is that modeling for our clients, right? That I mean, what you're modeling by saying, "Hey, you know what? My body is telling me I need some water." You're modeling like self-care in that moment. That's
Right.
honestly what that is. You're listening to what your
Yeah.
body is telling you, and that's what we're trying to teach our clients to do.
Absolutely. You're modeling self care, but there is an unhealthy kind of toxic expectation that
Yes.
what you're modeling is that you've lost focus on your client for,
Yeah.
that's not healthy. We're not blank
Right.
slates anymore,
Right. Right. Right.
So I
Right.
will say, I need to run to the bathroom. And
Yeah.
with my grandma, there were times, and I don't like this, did not feel professional. It felt very messy. But there were times with my grandma where I've had to tell my clients, like, I'm waiting on a really important call. And it's
Yeah.
like, it's a physician who you've been waiting for that call for 3 days. And if you don't pick
Yeah.
it up, you will
You
never
won't
talk
get
to
it
them.
again.
Like, right.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like, so you got to be kind of tethered to that phone. And that's the worst.
Well, and I think, like, with those kinds of situations, I mean, because 'cause I've had that with I have my oldest child has, some special needs, and so I've been
Hmm.
there with that, or, like, that, "Hey, he's not feeling well, I'm expecting a phone call from the school," or, like,
Hmm.
you just happen to see, like, "Oh, crap, the daycare or the school is calling,
I
I'm gonna have
know.
to take this." But again, like, that's one of those things that some of those are things that you can't anticipate, right? Like when you went in to started with many of your clients, your grandmother was not in the condition that she
Right.
was later or this past year. And
Hmm.
so stuff does come up where you have to let clients know, hey, look, this is going on. And so I may have to answer the phone for this. Or, for me, I usually let clients know in intake, like I am a mom. There are times when stuff may come up. I have a
Hmm.
child with severe food allergies, so if the school calls, I do have to pick
Yes.
up the phone. And again, I think we have to be okay with like, yes, is that self-disclosure? Yes. But also, it's not okay if I don't answer the phone when the school is calling if my child is having an anaphylactic
Exactly.
reaction,
It's like
right?
it's
Like,
holding both. It's holding both and it's
yes.
holding that it is hard. And yeah, your child's having an anaphylactic reaction, you gotta go.
Right.
And
Right.
it's either figure out how to do it flexibly and be human, or it's leave the field. I mean,
Yeah. Yeah.
because this is a field that is very scheduled. It's very like hour at a time.
Yeah.
You do have to see a decent number of clients to make a good
Yeah.
living.
Yeah.
My one of mine was so my father and my grandmother passed away within a year and a half of each other.
That's so much.
And yes, and I'm the only child and the only grandchild. So I
Yeah.
was it for both of them. And I had a packed day of clients and I saw my 8 o'clock and then I saw that I had a phone call. I checked my message and my father had passed away. And I
Yeah.
had a client right now. And I'm like, gosh, this job is hard sometimes.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I just so sorry, I've had a death in the family, like, right
Yeah.
now. I need to
Yeah.
cancel.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then
And I
even with that, feeling guilty, feeling
right.
unprofessional.
Yeah. Well, and I feel like that's a great example of being able to recognize that dual feeling, right? Like,
Yeah,
I need to do this for myself. I'm recognizing that this is a priority. I have to take this time off for myself.
yeah,
And also, like, I don't like how this feels in how I'm showing up in my business, right? You can have both of
exactly.
those and it still be okay to take that time off, right? Like that
Exactly.
feeling of not like, I don't like that I have to do this doesn't mean you shouldn't do it. And I
Mhm.
think so often, I feel like our field and so many of us in this field are so risk adverse, and we're so afraid that if I sneeze, I'm going to have an ethics violation, and that like
Right.
canceling last minute is somehow like unethical. And it's like, no,
An
what's
emergency.
what's unethical is if you're sitting in that session and you're not, you know, able to tune in, and you're not listening to the client, and you're making mistakes or saying inappropriate things or whatever it might
Mhm.
be, like that's where I think we have to do better at being willing and able to say no, or not right now, or we had an awful stomach virus that went in
Mm.
through our family last week, and I had to cancel on some clients that, again, I felt bad for because they're on a biweekly schedule. I knew it was going to be a month till I saw them again, but I'm like, there is no way I can sit in session. Even before I got
Mhm.
it, I was like, I have vomiting children. Like, I can't be in session and be like, hold on, let me go get the bucket.
Ah,
That's not going to work for anybody. And so, yeah, it doesn't feel good, but I'm
mm-mm.
honoring that my need is a priority here.
Absolutely. And that, I call it my mom guilt snowy day epiphany, which is one a day where it was a snow day, which I'm in Ohio. So school was canceled. My daughter was little. I had a full day of clients. I'm trying to scramble to find some kind of childcare for her. And I'm
Yeah.
realizing that I'm not with my kid on the
Yeah.
snow day, and I'm letting my therapy clients down. And that's when I realized, like, it's kind of an impossible situation. You're not going to be able to play both roles
Yeah.
perfectly. And that, so you just
No.
muddle through, you do the best you can, and you
Yeah.
accept that you're human and your clients are human. And most of
Yeah.
my clients don't want to come in on a
Yes.
snow day anyway.
Right.
You
And
know, I,
clients are much more understanding about you taking time off than we give them credit for. I mean,
mm-hmm,
I see so many women talking about planning for maternity leave, and they're like, "Well, what about my clients? Like, I don't want to leave them hanging." And I've taken maternity leave 3 times in private practice, and I've never had anybody be like, "How dare you?" Right? Like,
mm-hmm,
no,
right.
nobody has ever said that. They're like, "Yes, please take that time. Please don't feel like you need to respond to emails." And I think it is about when it's appropriate, making plans, right? So like maternity leave,
Mm-hmm,
we can plan for, we can prepare
mm-hmm,
for, we can get coverage or help clients with transitioning to another provider, or however you want to structure that. In a situation like yours, where you're like, I've had this unexpected death or this unexpected illness, that there may be a little bit more abruptness. There may be a little bit quicker of I have to stop for the next month, or I'm
mm-hmm,
pausing and stopping and I don't know when I'm able to return.
mm-hmm,
And that clients are allowed to feel upset about that,
mm-hmm,
right? Like they're allowed to feel, that it feels like abandonment. You're not doing that, right? Like that, but that may bring that up for them, and that's okay,
mm-hmm.
right? Like just like we teach our clients, like they're not responsible for others' feelings. Like we are not responsible for our clients' feelings as well. We just
Yes.
have to help them manage that and navigate like where is their support available. And if you are still that support, right? Maybe you are available via email or something
Mm-hmm.
like that,
Sure.
still maintaining the boundaries that you need to take care of yourself during that
Yes.
time.
And having colleagues and
Yes.
your community who you can refer to is so important. If you see
Yeah.
people locally, reach out to some therapists,
Yeah.
offer to buy them a cup of coffee and say, let's talk about how we can collaborate. How can we co-refer to each other? You know, it's good to have a community like that. And in private
Absolutely.
practice, you have to be intentional about building it.
Yes. Yeah.
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 So, a few strategies that we've talked about: having a savings account, having a plan, putting money aside
Yeah.
to plan for upcoming time off.
Yeah.
And that could be for a planned thing like maternity leave. It could also be an emergency fund. You know,
Could
I
also
put
be in a vacation time.
it sure could. Yes, I do $50 a week in a savings account that's just for like paid time off, whatever's needed. And I don't really miss $50 a week.
Right.
And I know I'm fortunate to be able to do that. And for some people, especially starting out, that might be a lot. So make it $20 a week. Just start the
Yeah.
fund.
Yeah.
So that's one aspect of it. Having support, having backups. having additional streams of income, if you can have a passive income stream like a digital course or digital product. Now, I do want to say you don't put that together and immediately start bringing in income.
Right.
Ashley
Right.
and I know we've both been in this online business game for years. It
Right.
takes time to build
Yeah.
your audience, but start so that 4 years from now you do have that income stream.
Yeah.
Actually, teaching CEUs. So when I was diagnosed with cancer and it was COVID, I started offering online CEUs. I became approved through my state. And that is one that can happen quickly. It takes 3 to 4 months to get everything approved, but then once you are offering it, like you can fill it and get income right
Yeah.
away. And you do still have to market it like everything else, but I feel like it's easier to market than most
Yeah.
other things. So I started teaching CEUs, and then people wanted to know how to teach CEUs themselves. And so I developed my consulting business where that's exactly what I help people do. And I recently changed my signature program, which is my Therapist Educators Academy, T for short. I recently changed that to a monthly $47 a month membership because I really wanted it to be flexible,
Yeah.
accessible. You
Yeah.
know, times are tough, but no matter what, people need therapists.
Right.
And no matter what, therapists need CEUs.
CEUs. Yeah.
And we are tired of boring ones. We are tired of like the ones that you can just take the quiz and basically buy the CE hours. Like
Right.
we want to learn,
Right.
so there's that. Another thing that we haven't touched on are systems and automation. So here's a really simple one. I always have my out of office reply on my therapy email, and it has all the information that someone would need as far as like, here's the type of work that I do. I only am accepting people for EMDR intensive. So here's the info about that. Here is if you're a new client, I'm not accepting new clients for traditional therapy. Here's referrals, here's emergency numbers. Like I
Yeah.
have this big old auto response
Yeah.
that's like everything you need to know. And that saves me so much time not having to answer
Yeah.
those.
Yeah, for sure. No, I
So
mean, that in of itself, that talk about bandwidth management, that's a huge one.
absolutely. I was spending so much bandwidth turning people away
Yeah.
because, like I said, I've had to cut way back. My practice is about 12 clients a week ish.
Yeah.
And I take insurance, which means I do get a decent number of referrals still. And I was so exhausted from turning people away. And I didn't want to hire someone just to call people back and say, I can't take you.
Sure. Sure.
So it's on my email auto reply, and it's also on my voicemail outgoing message.
Yeah.
And that saves me a ton of bandwidth.
Yeah. 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 I want to go back for a second to what you were
Yeah.
talking about with CEUs, because I think
Yeah.
for people watching this, like, I want to just kind of give a perfect example of how I feel like CEUs are a really great alternative income stream because, well, for a variety of reasons, all the reasons you listed. But like, I personally had an experience with this past year where, like I said, I planned for my maternity leave and I knew it was going to be very financially tight. And then we had this move coming. And while the move is expected, there's always unexpected things that come up. And like, we didn't know when we would get there, like childcare and all of this stuff. And so I was going to have to take a longer extended period of time from like working during the move, even. And so I have done CEUs. I've presented. I have kind of two that I've done several times over the last 4 or 5 years. And it's great because I have the courses already built. And that, like, once it's built, that bandwidth doesn't take time, right? Like, so if you already have this thing, for me, it was okay, I need to bring in some additional income the next couple months. I don't have the bandwidth or the time
Hmm.
to see clients right now. Like when we moved here, I had to take off, or during the move, I took off all of July and August and half of September because we didn't have childcare and school wasn't started yet. But I was able to offer on a Saturday a CEU that I already had done. I went back through maybe like 1 hour a day for one day just to look and make sure, "Oh, I need to tweak this a little bit." But I was able to do that, and it didn't require the mental energy from me that it takes at the beginning to, like, start to
Right.
develop it. And even that's not, it's a different type of energy than like a client facing energy. So it didn't take that because I already had it built. But then
Mhm.
also, it didn't take the energy that it would normally take for me, like in seeing a client. And so I felt like I
Absolutely.
had the capacity to do that. And so if
Yes.
you're like, okay, how do I plan for, say, maternity leave or for those emergency situations or for after kids come along and you're like, okay, now it's like a week because yeah, one kid is sick and now the next two are sick. How do I
Mhm.
plan for that? Having a CEU that you're like, "Okay, you know what? That I got a good, um, response with it last time, I can offer it
Mhm.
again." Or you and I have been talking, like, I've offered it statewide, and now I'm looking to offer it nationwide, right? Like, there's other avenues
Absolutely.
for that. It's not going to take the same level of bandwidth from from me to as it does with clients. So I think it's just a
Exactly.
really great way of, it doesn't have to be this huge other like business if you don't want it to be, but
Mhm.
it can be this other source of an income stream that absolutely can supplement the work you're doing with clients.
Exactly. I always ask people, do you want just an occasional income stream that's away from your clinical work? It's fun, it's using your expertise that you already have. You're not learning a
Yeah.
whole new thing and teaching about this.
Right,
You're
right.
teaching what you already know. So it's fairly easy to talk, put together a presentation. Or do you want to build an empire? Do you want to be the
Yeah.
next Pessy and have
Right.
conferences and people speaking under you? You can do both.
Right.
You can
Right.
absolutely do both. So I agree with you. And you're talking about teaching live CEs, which, yes, once you've built it, you can teach it over and over. Usually
Yeah.
it's a 1 to 2 year approval period. And I have done that where I put together a CE, I offer it live, and then I'll go to different organizations and agencies and teach it for them,
Yeah.
and you're not reinventing the wheel. You're just showing up and teaching what you know. Are you going to be a
Yeah.
billionaire? No, but it is not hard to make
Right.
$500
Yep.
of additional income on a Saturday morning by having 10
Exactly.
people in your CEU training,
Exactly.
and that goes in your maternity fund or your
Yeah.
emergency fund.
Yeah. Absolutely.
So to me,
Absolutely.
it's a very realistic, very doable, and really
Yeah.
helpful income stream that you can scale as big or as small as you want.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah. Okay. Well, is there anything else we missed as far as tools that we wanted to share? We talked about the financial part. We talked about having support systems, automations, additional income streams. Anything else
Yeah,
you
I
want to
mean,
make
the
sure?
only other thing that I would add, and this is so state dependent, and I've seen this a lot come up around maternity leave specifically. But one of the downsides to being in private practice is we're working for ourselves. So, like, we don't have benefits, that kind of thing. And so, like what we've talked about, being able to put money aside for that rainy day fund, for that emergency fund, for that planned maternity leave or that planned, time off is so vital. But I would say also to look at your state because some states do actually have an FMLA
Mm,
leave kind of, I don't know, hot isn't the right word, but program that you are able to access, even if you are self-employed. And so that is something to just look at. I know, like, I think Connecticut has one, Oregon has one, Washington State, I believe, does. And so there's different situations that they apply to, but it's something to just look into as well, right? So that way, if you ever have to utilize that resource, that it is there. But I think I think you don't bank on that necessarily, right?
right.
Because that's also not going to cover those times when like it's unexpected that you're homesick when the kids are homesick, right? So
Hmm.
just, but looking at what are there other options like that are available to help supplement what you're doing.
That could be a piece of the puzzle is some
Yes.
sort of
Yeah.
long term,
Yeah.
yeah, long term insurance or.
Yeah. Then there is like there's Aflac, which again is not really available to self-employed people typically. So if you have a
Hmm.
partner, sometimes you're able to get on that, even through your partner. But like I know at the state level, it is supposed to help cover like maternity leave or
Okay.
like sick leave, that kind of thing.
Good to
So it's
know.
something to
Yes.
look at if your state does offer that.
Wonderful. Okay. All right, Ashley. Well, it's been so good having you on. How can people find you? How can people work with you?
Yeah. So I actually have a podcast called the Raise to Empower podcast where we look at strategies for building and growing your private practice, as well as looking at it through the lens of kind of how do we as women and mom clinicians, you know, build a practice that is sustainable, that helps kind of fight the oppressive systems that we are oftentimes working against.
Hmm.
And so you can check that out on Apple Podcast, Spotify. It's the Raised to Empower podcast. And you can also find me on Instagram at Raised to Empower. My website is also Raised to Empower. So you can find me there and look at the courses and trainings that I have about, building your private practice. And so, yeah, those are great ways to connect with me. And yeah, I always love collaborating and connecting with people, so
Me
please reach
too.
out.
Yes, absolutely. Okay, well, I'll make sure that all of that is in the show notes. And Ashley, thank you again for coming on. It's always a pleasure to chat with
I always
you.
love connecting with you.
Yes, me too. All right, everyone out there listening, thank you so much for joining us, and we will see you next time.